everyone. I'm Alpin Hong, here on behalf of Franklin Pond Chamber Music. Welcome to today's episode of Beyond the Music, a new series about the business of music performance. While the central mission of Franklin Pond Chamber Music is to train young musicians in the art of preparing and performing chamber music, we also want our students to get the chance to interact with some of the industry's most experienced arts professionals. Today's very special guest is Jennifer Barlament, the Executive Director of the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. I encountered Jennifer for the first time when she was the executive director of my hometown Kalamazoo Symphony, and have been privileged to witness her amazing journey. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be here, Alpin, and so great to reconnect with you. And I'm very excited to meet all of you students and especially to hear your questions. So please do be thinking about what you're curious about.
Well, can you tell us a little bit of your background and how you came to be involved in the field of arts administration?
Yeah, so most of the people that I know who are in administration came to it through lots of different paths. And there is nobody that I know who does what I do who realized when they were in high school that that's what they wanted to do. In fact, when I was in high school, I did not even realize there was such a thing as orchestra management. So just in a nutshell, I grew up in kind of mostly two places. We lived in Germany for several years, and that's where I started my musical journey, started taking lessons and learning how to play the recorder. And then we moved back to the U.S., and I was about to go into fourth grade, and that's when you got to choose an instrument. So I chose the clarinet, and I thought that I was going to be an engineer, actually. That was my sort of primary career goal when I went to college. I came up here to Emory to go to college, and while I was here, I met some very important mentors who also happened to be members of the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. So the two people I'll mention who were most influential in my path were Ardan, the principal clarinetist of the Atlanta Symphony, who was my teacher, and Jun-Ching, who was my chamber music coach, and just very influential. I'm sure you all know Jun-Ching. And my heart in music took me to the Eastman School of Music for a master's degree, and that's actually where I got exposed to orchestra administration. It actually became a bigger and bigger deal. It became part of the curriculum. At some point, somebody said, you know, like, you can do this for a living, because I was actually spending more time working on the orchestra than I was practicing the clarinet. And so that's really how I got interested in orchestra administration, working for the Kalamazoo Symphony. Just prior to coming back here to Atlanta, I was working for the Cleveland Orchestra, and we've lived in a lot of places and worked for a number of different orchestras in between then. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Now, can you describe some of your specific duties as executive director?
Yes. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because like as the executive director, your duties vary a lot from day to day because you're theoretically responsible for everything working. And so you kind of have to like jump in, and to give you a sense of kind of the big picture responsibilities that a CEO or president or executive director may have. The big ones have to do with financial management, a lot of time talking to supporters, donors, and board members, and helping lead the team. So the administrative staff is part of my responsibility, making sure that they're all inspired and moving in the right direction, that we're all working together, and that we're clear about what we're doing and why we're doing it. So those are kind of the biggest pieces. But as I said, it can vary wildly from day to day. You'd be surprised.
Well, you said that in your journey, you got bitten by the bug, I would say, relatively late. You didn't know, first of all, that arts administration was even a thing, as a lot of us are not even aware in high school that there is a career in these extra performance fields. Do you have any suggestions or advice for any young people out there that might be interested into going this field, certain things that they can look into now?
One of the things that I always say, and I truly believe this, and I've heard other people say it too, often young people are playing off different options against each other. And my advice is always go with where your heart is. The thing that was a real revelation for me is, and obviously you're getting exposed to this a lot earlier than I was, so that's great. there are a lot of different ways to support music and music making. The motivation for me really was the opportunity to make a difference and to make a big contribution. So if it weren't for my work, if I weren't doing a good job, the audience wouldn't show up, the orchestra wouldn't get paid, there wouldn't be a conductor, there wouldn't be stands. You know, there's I have just a really immense sense of satisfaction in what I'm able to do. So it was actually really liberating for me to make that transition. I think the more aware you are of all the various different ways, if you want to go into a career in music, all the various different ways you can do that, to think broadly about what your potential career could be.
I often tell students, especially of this age, that they shouldn't go into music, the world of music, unless it's something they really can't live without. Can you perhaps describe certain events maybe along your life path that made you think that you wanted to go into classical music? One
of the reasons why I love working for orchestras is having the opportunity to work with musicians. No matter where you are, musicians are some of the most extraordinary people I've ever met, and getting to hang out with them, support their work, hear the concert, it's just so rewarding. So all of you, having studied an instrument and become very dedicated and really passionate about playing an instrument, you're going to be a big leg up if you have any interest in a career in orchestra administration or arts administration, because you understand the way musicians think. You know what they need in order to be successful and be able to do their best work.
What are some ways that a high schooler or a college student can feel out if they would be interested in arts administration? Are there internships, things like that, volunteer positions that they can do?
Yeah, actually, interestingly, probably one of the best things you could do would be, as on a volunteer basis, you could volunteer to usher at concerts. And often when you do that, you get a little bit more of a insight into what happens. You get to know the staff. We'd love for any of you to come usher at concerts. It's a really fun way and you get to hear the music, so that's always a plus.
I wanted to take the opportunity just for a second. Naturally, the reason we are meeting virtually, of course, is because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has hit the performing arts world harder than perhaps any other industry. How have you navigated this time, and how do you envision coming out of it?
Well, I think there are a couple of different analogies that I think of when it comes to getting through COVID. And one of those is kind of analogous to the way I was talking about career, right? Like you get to point A, and then at some point you realize you've got a choice to go to either this or this, and then you do what seems to make sense, and then you go to the next step and do what makes sense. And so, I'm sure it's similar to the way many of you and your school experiences have evolved this year. And so for us, it was just all about, taking the next step forward, one step at a time. I've always thought of orchestras as kind of like a big battleship, right? Like we tend to plan seasons 2 years in a row in advance, and we don't change things. It's a big deal to change things after the fact, and we've kind of had to channel our inner flexibility and nimbleness over the past year. And so I think we've become much more confident about our ability to be flexible and respond to things as they come along, which I think is really important. Like orchestras have to be a part of what's happening right now in order for us to mean something to our communities. And so I'm excited about that. I think that's a very positive thing coming out of COVID.
And I just had a question actually from the gallery. What is important on a resume when you are hiring someone?
Well, I think obviously having shown, for me, if I look at someone who's, relatively inexperienced, it is clear that, for one thing, they have played music at a high level and shown a high level of commitment. That says a lot to me. It means that this person understands the world that they are applying to become a part of, and that's incredibly important. Second, I will also say, I'm a huge fan of internships. Sometimes the idea of working someplace and in a field can be more attractive than the work actually is on a day-to-day basis, and you might get into it and realize, I don't like this. And so if somebody has worked for an orchestra, even if it's as an intern, it means a lot to me. And then also, reaching out to professionals in the field and asking them how things work so that you can speak intelligently in an interview process about what you're talking about. I mean, the most important thing literally in a resume, like talking about the piece of paper here, is make it brief, spell everything right, have all of the information right there, your phone number, email address, and name. Don't go into obnoxious detail on your resume. Try to keep it just to one page and keep it simple, but make it very targeted to the job that you're applying for.
One of the students asked, what kind of career path or hobbies or connections can a prospective student take? For example, maybe what you think would be a good major in college that they could pursue, or maybe a minor in college they could pursue that would better inform them or better prepare them for this field?
That is a really good question. I mean, to be perfectly honest, as I mentioned, I came to administration so late in my educational path that I didn't really have time to take classes in what I do on a day-to-day basis. And so if I had to do it all over again, I for sure would definitely still major in music. I think that's really important to, really dig in, play in ensembles, get involved. Probably would have minored in business. I have a colleague who majored in music and minored in finance, which I think is a good combination as well. I think, a psychology major is always helpful. Sociology, managing an orchestra is all about working with people, and there are a lot of people to work with. And so the more you can understand human nature as well as music and business, the better. So yeah, I think any of those are good options. And I know there's a Franklin Pond alum, maybe a couple, 3, who are currently pursuing educational opportunities in arts administration.
Yes, I got the opportunity to interview Liam McBain, who is one of those pursuing, and it was very, very interesting talking to someone who, like I said, is bitten by this bug at a relatively young age. What other different jobs that the ASO has besides just playing? So
there's what's called operations, which is nuts and bolts of putting on concerts. We've got stage managers. We've got people who manage the orchestra's schedule. You have to be able to read the contract and interpret it and understand contractual rules. We've got people who work in the library and handle the physical parts and score and get those to the orchestra. We have personnel managers who make sure everybody's in the right seat at the right time and communicate with the orchestra, help manage their benefits, and just, all of their sort of work-life things. And we also, and auditions, of course. And then we have the artistic planning area. So those are the people who are, calling up managers and lining up soloists and conductors and helping with the conductor decide what the repertoire will be, and then also when an guest artist is in town, make sure they're comfortable, make sure they have what they need, get them to the right place at the right time again, and then we've got the finance department, which keeps track of where all the money is, writes the checks, does the financial planning for the orchestra. We have human resources people who, again, help manage benefits, help do the hiring on the administrative staff side, and make sure policies are what they're supposed to be. Information technology, for any of you computer lovers, you know what that's all about. We have a marketing team that works with a lot of different external communications, advertises concerts, works with the press. That's called communications. And then we have, in our team, we have a little bit of a different structure. Sales is slightly different from marketing. And so the people actually get on the phone and sell the tickets and do the transaction part of subscriptions and ticket sales. And then we have what's called fundraising, or development is the code word for fundraising, which is the people who manage our annual fund. They get out the letters, they make the calls, they make the asks, and invite people to support the orchestra above and beyond buying tickets. And then there's the, me type person who kind of pulls it all together. And the title for my role can generally be either, executive director, CEO, president, managing director, something like that. And then in terms of numbers, there are 88 musicians in the orchestra, and right now, pre-COVID, we had about 53 people on the administrative staff.
It has been an absolute privilege to speak to you today. Once again, we've had the privilege of speaking with Jennifer Barlament, the Executive Director, President, CEO of the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm Alpin Hong, and on behalf of Franklin Pond Chamber Music, stay tuned for the next wonderful episodes of Beyond the Music. Thank you so much, and good night.